Tuesday, May 16th, 2017, 1 o'clock sharp. Can we have a roll call, please?
Calling the row, Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Brown. Here. Mr. Miller.
Here.
We have a quorum, and I'd like the record to reflect that Mr. Brady is in attendance.
All right, and I do apologize. Last time I skipped public comment related to agenda. My mistake, so the first person could please come up.
First, we have Mr. Nathan Mankey.
Hello. Hello, County Council.
Is your button on?
Good afternoon.
My button?
Is it green?
Yes.
All right.
It is. All right. I'm here today to talk about the RFP that went out for the Norma Herr Women's Center. And I do remember a meeting on May 3rd, Ms. Conwell, where you were talking about possible workshops for writing the proposals, because the way the RFP was set up is it's essentially the best proposal wins. I would like to put forward a certain opinion about those workshops or about how the RFP might be changed or edited in the future. One thing I would like to include is if bidders that have already been awarded that contract for a previous year, there should be some kind of amendment to assess how well they upheld their petition or how well they upheld their proposal for the previous RFP. I did get to read over the RFP for the Norma Herr Women's Center, and there's nowhere in there does it assess how well the previous bidder of Frontline Services actually upheld their proposal and if they followed through on any of the promises they made. And I think that should be definitely included. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Huh?
Next is Ms. Ramona Trimble.
Good afternoon, council members. I've been coming to the council meetings, pouring out my heart to let you know that the conditions at Norma Herr are terrible. And since I was at the last meeting, there's been another suicide attempt, and there's a resident that goes there on and off because she doesn't feel safe. So a lot of the time she has chosen to sleep outside, and she feels she has a better chance of not getting robbed on the street as opposed to the shelter. And she doesn't trust the staff, so she sleeps in the hall close to the officer on duty when she's there. The current provider has been informed repeatedly about numerous problems at the shelter, and LMM acts like it's rocket science to prepare decent meals for the shelters. I can't understand how either of these providers could realistically get the contract to provide services to the women's shelter instead of Westside Catholic, Magnolia, and NEOC, who have been reaching out to this population for years, and this population trusts all three of these organizations. The request for a new provider was done as an alternative if Frontline didn't meet the needed requests made by the women over a year ago. And the renovations even proved the lack of consideration for the women by the current provider. And as an ex-resident of the shelter, the decision to let the current provider continue to provide this unservice is quite disturbing. I came to reach out to the council one more time to take the women into consideration first, being this is the only shelter for single women in the entire city of Cleveland, and at this point, they still don't even have a television. This is something that's been ongoing for over a year, so they can't even keep up with what's going on around them. It's just, to me, it's a very abusive situation, and I'm very concerned about the decision to let them continue. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Brian Davis.
So I wasn't able to stay around 2 weeks ago for the hearing, but I did watch it when I got back to the office and was reprimanded, as was NEOC, for our treatment and alleged disrespect of both the chair and Ms. Gillette, and to the point that it was stated that Ms. Gillette doesn't want to meet with homeless people anymore. And I quickly responded, set up a meeting with our board president and Councilwoman Conwell for last Thursday to respectfully point out that the anger, frustration, and rude behavior from the women was what democracy looks like. We wanted to explain that all of you as elected officials and the representatives of Cuyahoga County have to be willing to face taxpayers over the decisions and defend those choices that you made, because the women have to live with those decisions every night. There is a real problem if you're not willing to stand up to the residents who have to live in fear of being kicked out on Payne Avenue. And then my job as an advocate is to amplify the voices of my constituents and not just stifle them. Anyway, I showed up for the scheduled meeting last Thursday, as did my board president, and surprisingly, Councilwoman Conwell did not show up. No call, no apology for wasting our time. I felt this was very unprofessional. With regard to the legislation and the awarding of the contract, I hope that you will pull this and start over. No group got the required 85 points, which would be technically responsive. This, along with all the other problems that have come up, lead me to ask Cuyahoga County to just start over the process. Issue a new request for proposal, extend the contracts while that is taking place, and then the new request take into account overflow, security, public safety, the attempted suicides, the number of EMS calls, grievance resolution, all of the things that have been brought up as complaints. And then a brand new committee should be constituted to look at the contracts, preferably with minority members of our community as part of that selection committee. And they should be able to go out and talk to women who are currently staying at any of the providers that submit for bid. And then NEOC will even promise not to taint the process, as Rosie has suggested, and be part of that process if that was the obstacle to a better shelter being created in Cleveland. As I said before, unless there is a dramatic change over at the women's shelter, then we'll all be having to live with the tragedy that comes over the next year at the women's shelter.
Thank you. Next.
Miss Rosie Palfy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, council members. I wanted to thank Councilman Brady for being diligent enough to make time to attend this meeting. I know you're busy with your presidential duties. Also, I would like to thank Councilwomen Conwell and Brown for spending the night at the women's shelter. Apparently, NEOC found that out through public records requests, and I realize you weren't there all day. I think if you would have come earlier at dinner time, you probably would have been recognized. So I'm just grateful, period, that you spent the night there. As far as the shelter RFPs go, excuse me, I feel like the entire process wasn't transparent. However, I think at this point, we really need to move forward. I believe that had the proposal been in LMM's name, that there'd be a lot less controversy than there would be the way it's currently out there in Frontline's name. Nobody has ever questioned whether LMM should or shouldn't run the shelter operations at the men's shelter, which is the largest shelter in the state of Ohio. Yes, they have problems, but nothing is ever going to be perfect at a shelter. And I am concerned about the scores. I feel like anybody who's been running a shelter for years, if they're applying to renew their contract, that they should probably get a 90 on the and not an 80 or an 84. But as far as I'm concerned, these are just words on paper unless you've got the intent to back it up. And I feel like, number one, I'm concerned. I suggested at a meeting, HHS meeting a month ago, that we have the contract for a year. I appreciate the council's concerns, but I looked at the paperwork online for this meeting, and it looks like the contract for the women's shelter would end at the end of the year. And one of my concerns is, if I was job hunting and I went for an interview and I was told, hey, we've only got this contract for 7 or 6 more months, for all intents and purposes, this is a temporary job, I wouldn't take that job. So my concern is going to be about whether or not they'll be able to hire people. And also, everybody knows Westside Catholic runs the best shelter in the city of Cleveland. However, they don't have clients with the same barriers that are at the women's shelter. And any shelter proposal that didn't include security with off-duty police officers, I don't care how good the rest of the proposal was, that would be a non-starter for me. And anybody who suggests that they don't need that and that there's a viable alternative, I feel like is out of touch with what's going on at the shelter. So thank you.
Thank you.
Last, Ms. Liu.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just heard a very wonderful comments with that particular phrase, out of touch. General public have the impression homeless shelter definitely is not a good place. Know this, know that. We all understand that. But when it goes to over the limit of what ordinary people can actually endure emotionally, mentally, and physically, this is not acceptable because county never intended to provide no service. Otherwise, why would county fund the shelters to begin with? However, the current service providers, they have never provided whatever they said they would do in the past proposals. As I stated before, in the past how many months, frontline service should not even be allowed to bid on shelter anymore. Not even this particular one. I realize because the county system changed from 6 years ago. That was the reason why the contract could pass as no bid contract and nobody realized the problem actually existed already. Now, it's a time. County government can do the right thing at this time to issue the proper RFP, to select the real reputable service providers based on reality. Otherwise, people will only criticize OHS or county is totally disconnected to the people they service. That doesn't make good to county. That doesn't help the homeless people. It goes to the same other services county provides too. The transparency is the key. I hope, Mr. Miller, your proposal for that county ordinance will really take effect immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else, clerk?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. We will now move down to number 4, item 4, approval of the minutes from the May 3rd meeting. Can I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Minutes have been approved. There's several items referred to the committee today. Clerk, if you could read the first item into the record.
Resolution 2017-0083, making awards on requisition number 38561 to various providers in the total amount not to exceed $8,395,794 for emergency shelter services for single adults at various facilities located in the city of Cleveland for the period 5/1/2017 through 12/31/2019, as printed on the agenda.
All right, we do have a proposed substitute in the packet. If we can have Director, there she is. Please go over the proposed amendments.
Good afternoon, Council Committee. Ruth Gillette, Office of Homeless Services. I'm here to ask that the committee consider making instead of making an award based on the RFP results, to do a RFP exemption. The reason being that in preparing for the Health and Human Services and Aging Committee meeting of May 3rd, a procedural issue with the RFP was discovered related to the evaluation of the projects. A minimum required score had been established in the RFP. In reviewing the documents, it was discovered that neither of the two bidders for the women's shelter contract had met the identified minimum score. The recommended vendor was less than 1 point for meeting the minimum score, and the second bidder was well below the established minimum score. However, the RFP language is not clear about what should be done in the case where no bidders meet the minimum score. But because of the contentiousness associated with this RFP, our law department has recommended that the award be made as an exemption to the RFP process for an 8-month period through the end of 2017 in the amount of $964,524, and that the services be rebid between now and the end of the year. This course of action will permit services to continue at the women's shelter while a bid process goes forward. This issue has occurred before in the RFP processes in other departments, and it is for this reason that it is recommended generally that a minimum score not be set. And in the future, I will follow this guidance. County Procurement Office and Law Department have determined that the integrity of the bid process is best served by releasing the bid scores after a contract has been awarded. So the scoring will eventually be made public after the contract is approved by County Council.
Any questions from committee? Okay, hearing none. I'll make a motion to move forward the proposed substitute, so it could be the working document in front of us. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are now working from the proposed substitute. I will ask one more time, is there any questions in regards to this? All right.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Miller?
Just a comment, and this has come up in the context of some other items as well. I think that the contracts are an integral part of legislation, and I'm not real comfortable with the idea that the public cannot see the scoring results while we're in the process of making a decision on the contract, and I think we should just look into that for future consideration. But I'm certainly comfortable with going forward with the legislation. Thank you.
All right.
Madam Chair.
President Brady.
Just for clarity, I think I'm clear. This contract would continue, we would allow this contract to continue with Frontline till the end of the year.
To the
Correct.
chair, to Councilman Brady, yes,
But a new contract will be bid out.
that's correct.
True. And how long is that contract going to be for? Do we know yet?
Generally speaking, the RFP processes, which are quite time-intensive, the recommendation is that the contract be awarded based on a review process for at least 2 years, usually 3 years. The contract with Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry is being reviewed at the end of 2018. So I don't know. I would leave that up to Bob Math. His department will be doing the RFP, and so whatever they recommend and put before you, and of course, you all have the ability to extend it or limit it, so, it's up to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Just say that along with members of the council, given everything that's happened, that we want to be very much involved in this process, so that when we rebid this contract and we award it, that we don't end up in a situation where it either isn't good or it doesn't look good or both. And so we've got some time to make sure that we take a serious look at these issues and try to step back from whatever we already think we know, or our opinions about any of the individuals involved in any of this, because we've got to make sure the public has confidence in this shelter, and we've got to go beyond our own perspective. In order to do that, if we have to go beyond our own preconceived perspective, then that's what we're going to have to do. And so I want to pledge, to myself, on behalf of to the chairperson, that I want to be involved in this. And I appreciate all the work that's been done by the chairperson and others leading up to this. This is a unusual wrinkle, the way this came out, and we're going to have to be awfully careful to cross our T's and dot our I's this next time around. And I'm still sort of baffled how we ended up here in the first place, but I'm going to put that away and move forward.
Thank you. So I'd like to have a motion to move this to the Committee of the Whole for second reading suspension.
So moved.
Madam Chair.
Miller.
Just one question before we proceed. The contract that we're going to have in place for 8 months, is that going to be the partnership frontline LMN contract that was envisioned in this legislation, but only for 8 months, as opposed to the existing contract that's in place now?
To the chair, to Councilman Miller. Yes, we are awarding an 8-month contract based on a bid that was received. So we are awarding a contract based on that bid. So
It's the same bid, but for the 8 months. Okay, fine.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank
you.
you. Clerk, if you could read the next item into the record, please.
Resolution 2017-0093, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 1600090 with the Centers for Families and Children for implementation of a job skills center for work required public assistance recipients for the period 7/1/2016 through 6/30/2017, to extend the time period to 12/31/2017, to change the scope of services effective 7/1/2017, and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $561,227.50.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Math.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, committee members. Bob Math from Office of Health and Human Services on behalf of Job and Family Services. This is requesting an approval to an amendment to our contract with the Centers for Family and Children to continue to provide a wide range of job readiness activities to individuals that are in receipt of OWF cash assistance and individuals that are receive supplemental nutrition assistance or are involved in the food stamp program that have a work requirement. This amendment is only for a 6-month period from the current contract ends June 30th. There's an amendment for 6 months from July 1st through the end of the calendar year, at which time the JFS administrator wants to look at developing a whole new service delivery model effective January 1. So if you recall from some of our other contracts, most of our work activity contracts are only amended for a short period of time, and they're all ending December 31st. And then apparently there's an RFP in the works that's going to be released for a new model come January 1st. If I can, let me just give you maybe just a little history on this amendment. This is really a consolidation of 3 distinct but interrelated programs that were all competitively procured over the past 2 years. One component of the program was a job search, job placement, job retention program, working with these folks and that are supposedly job ready, finding them jobs, placing them on the jobs, and doing follow-up and to enhance retention. The second component of this amendment is something that state required several years ago, which was called a sanction compliance. So individuals that have a work requirement, if they were sanctioned, they lose their benefits because they didn't complete the required number of hours. The state indicated to the county that we are responsible for putting programs in place that would meet that would meet their sanction requirements. So based upon that contract, we entered into a contract in the middle of the year, like an April contract. The state mandated that. We competitively procured that. It was awarded to another vendor, for a year, who did a very credible job. The third component was our previous director wanted us to establish a computer lab. So folks that in receipt of public assistance could access a computer lab at any time, whether they needed it for an hour to make up a few hours, they want to do some job search online, they want to do some GED or, remediation tutorials. And that was another contract that was, that was competitively procured. And that contract in turn was awarded to the Center for Families and Children. What we did last year, we consolidated 2 of the programs. We took the sanction compliance that was with another vendor, consolidated that with the computer lab, figuring they could do both those activities together. So when we amended those contracts, one of them was amended like for 6 months, so we could kind of put them in, in sync. This amendment now is combining all 3 of those activities with the centers just for the 6-month period, as opposed to having, 2 different contracts. And the centers can provide, it through their 2 locations, one on 4500 Euclid and then their Barrio location on Detroit. This way an individual can come in, can receive job search assistance. We've helped them set up a computer lab. They can do those kind of activities, and at the same time, they could do these sanction compliance activities, so they could continue to maintain their eligibility for public assistance. So this was, originally we had 3 contracts total about $1.5 million. Now it's been consolidated, so when we consolidated, we eliminated one of the providers. We saved about $500,000 of TANF dollars. So this contract is this amendment is just for a 6-month period, for the $560,000 for them to continue to provide all these activities under one roof, for the balance of the calendar year.
Mr. Matthew mentioned 3 things: sanction, compliance, computer lab. What was the first one?
The first one is your job search and job placement programming.
Any questions from the committee?
Yes.
Councilwoman Baker?
Thank you. How long have you said that the sanctioned mandated from the state has been in place? For the
Councilwoman
county
Baker,
to,
that was 2 years ago, April, when we had to start that program. Now, again, the state indicated that the county was responsible for providing those activities.
Right.
So we had to competitively procure that. It was awarded at the time, was awarded to Catholic Charity Services to provide those services. When that contract ended, we decided to combine that with an existing contract to save some dollars, because the activities were somewhat similar.
continue? Because it's been 2 years, and it's not a program you probably would have done unless the state mandated it, how do you rate it? Is it something that you find worthwhile? Do you see results? Are people getting the skills or the job requirements that you would hope they would?
Councilwoman Baker, for those folks that had to participate because they weren't meeting their work requirement, 600 or 700 folks were referred for that. So I mean, it's a voluntary program. If they want to maintain their benefits, they have to come and meet their requirements. If they choose not to, then unfortunately they could be sanctioned, lose their benefits altogether. They can always reapply, but they still have to make up those hours that they missed. And again, it's actually a federal requirement, and the state implemented it on a local level. In terms of the job search component, the center has been very successful. Just for the year, and it was based upon the number of folks that are referred. They don't, keep in mind, they don't recruit any individuals. They're all referred by their caseworker over at JFS when they apply for benefits. So that contract initially was, they were expected to receive X number of referrals. And it's kind of we have some historical data, but again, they don't recruit individuals. And we have a formula that's kind of based on best practices. So hypothetically, if we say we're going to refer 500 individuals, we know that historically about 70% will actually show up, 30% will decide they don't want to show up, they don't need the benefits, they don't want to participate. Out of those 70% that show up, we expect all of them to become what we so-called job ready. Then of those that are job ready, we expect 60% of them to find employment. And so hypothetically, if 500 were referred, 70% is 350 would become job ready, then 60% of those. And those benchmarks are a little higher than kind of national, what we've seen in historical data. And so to give you a sense of where they are today, this is through April, they've achieved 76% of their placement rate, and they still have, 3 more, they still have 2 more months in this current contract to meet the benchmarks. And we anticipate, based upon their past history, that undoubtedly they will. one of the points is also job retention. And this year we built in a 180-day job retention, which is difficult, Most of those retention figures we won't see until the last quarter of that contract year. When they're placed, it's 180 days out. So that does take time. They're very aggressive in terms of this contract for the job search component of this contract, job placement. It's a combination of cost reimbursement and performance-based. So they get paid for people that are placed on the job and those that are retained on the job. So the highest payment point is the 180-day retention. So there's quite an incentive on their part to stay involved, to follow up and provide whatever support serves they need in order for them to remain on the job.
Meg, just, that all sounds pretty good, that the 70% or 60% of the 70% get the skills they need, finding jobs, and now we're tracking their retention. Is there anything that you would like to see changed? Is that a system that you want to continue if you had the choice, or change if you had the choice? Sounds like things are going pretty well after 2 years and really figuring out how to do it the most effective way.
No, I think, Councilman Baker, I think they're actually going, I think the model is well crafted, it's well developed.
Okay.
It's very labor intensive. When somebody's on a job, many of our customers want to kind of wash their hands and not deal with us any longer, to be perfectly candid. But, it's incentive on the providers to stay engaged with them because they know there's a payment point that's linked to the 180 retention. One of the ideas is we try to build them also, while they're doing the follow-up to ensure they're still on the job, we try to encourage them to pursue a career track as well.
Right.
I mean, it's clearly the key.
Sure.
For many of our folks that are on public assistance, unfortunately, they're concerned about putting food on their table tomorrow versus what's going to happen in 6 months from now. But we do, part of that follow-up that we emphasize with our contracted providers is to really just don't follow up just to make sure they're on the job. We'd like to see some wage progression. We'd like to see them involved in training or school. And if they do, we'll support them during those efforts.
Right, good, thank you. Thank you for your work.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to follow up, just for clarity. So we were sanctioned from the state because we need to find placement for work-related activities.
Councilman Conwell, no, we weren't sanctioned. These were, it's called sanctioned activities. So if a participant doesn't participate during their required hours, then as a county, we're required to put in place those activities where that person can go to have that sanction lifted. So we were not sanctioned.
Okay.
It's the folks that are sanctioned if they don't complete their required hours.
All right. Councilman Miller?
Just one question about the saving of the $500,000 and bringing this together. Did that result in fewer people being served, or are the same number being served but they won't receive any as much service? Or is it a matter that we simply reduce duplication and that we really didn't lose anything and saved $500,000?
Councilman Miller, through the chair, the latter is the answer. We didn't deprive anybody of lack of services. The same services were provided. Just at the time when these services were needed, we had no provider in place, so we had to completely procure under guidelines. Excuse me, under guidelines with TANF, federal dollars. We have to competitively procure all our services. So what we did, we just consolidated these programs. We added a few staff so they could handle the increased volume, because the volume increased dramatically just for those people that are, in kind of the sanction mode. But we didn't reduce the quality or the quantity of the services.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'm sure that there are other situations like that in county government. We gotta go out there and find them and save the money. I mean, we've got hundreds and hundreds of programs. We've got hundreds and hundreds of agencies, and not everything is perfectly coordinated, and we need to try to take advantage of these opportunities because the resources are limited. Thanks for your efforts. Bye.
You're welcome.
Just wanted to ask a question in regards to employment and family services, where we set up the one-stop shop kind of, the computers, the Dress for Success and things like that. Is that considered a criteria that the work-related individuals can utilize that instead of going somewhere else? Is that an activity that is?
You know, Councilwoman Conwell, potentially could be, you know, I mean, only the computer lab, but it depends what they do is, unfortunately, there are strings attached, you know, that the federal government applies. For example, if somebody wants to work on their GED, you know, the average, I hate to use the word, but the average person has to do roughly 30 hours of activities a week in order to maintain their benefits if somebody's on cash assistance. If you're doing, say, in a computer lab working on GED, that's only, you can only do that for 10 hours a week. So the 20 other hours, they have to do some other activity that's considered, that the federal government defines as allowable, which could be a job search activity. It could be an unpaid work experience activity. It could be education, you know, but GED, so the lab is only kind of the lab would only suffice as kind of a filler hours. So if somebody hypothetically is in school and say they're a part-time student and they're not meeting all their hours, they have to meet, they have still a balance of whether it's 5 hours or 10 hours they have to meet in order to maintain their benefits. So the lab, the computer lab is one place they can go to do those extra hours. So in a perfect world, somebody couldn't go to this one stop and spend, you know, 30 hours a week.
Looking for a job,
Looking for a
getting an
job.
education,
Right.
all the things.
It would
that
have to be
we
a
need.
combination of events, but unfortunately, we have to track and report them by that activity. It can get very convoluted at times for our frontline workers.
So we're mandated by the state to find the sanctioned activities, but we're not allowed to use that as total hours. We
For
can
the
use
sanction,
some.
for the sanction activities, the average person has to do about 6 hours of activities in order to have their sanction lifted. So they can go to a lab and do their 6 hours and have their sanction lifted. Once it's lifted, then they have to participate in this other allowable activity for 30 hours a week, you know? So the sanction activity could be almost, we define what those activities look like as a county. So if we say it could be, you know, remediation, working on, you know, on a computer, doing job search, internet, you know, online job search, it could be a myriad of things. We define that. The state doesn't define what those activities should look like. But again, for folks that are under sanction, they only average between 6 and 8 hours just to have their sanction lifted. So it's not really dramatic, you know. But once it's lifted, then they have to participate in another activity.
Isn't that kind of counterproductive
It can
in
be,
so many
you know.
I
It
mean, if
can
you
be,
have a
you know.
person that needs it, so who do we fight this with? So I'm not gonna argue the point
No,
here.
I would support that argument. I mean, it's always been listen, probably 40% of the folks that walk into JFS's office to apply for benefits are lacking a high school degree or GED, you know? And I don't have to preach to you, all know that, you know, education, you know, leads to higher wages. Many of our folks can't even get into skilled training programs because they don't meet the basic entrance requirements because they're not reading or doing math at the 8th grade level. So to get them up to speed, again, unfortunately, under the regulation, if they're on public assistance, we can't put them in a remediation class or GED training, you know, 10, 15, 20, 25 hours a week. And if you talk to the literacy experts, they have somebody move up from the 5th grade level to the 6th or the 8th. So it's a major commitment of their time.
So
It is
even
very
though
counterintuitive.
That's you said that was initially, that's a federal regulations.
Yes.
And the state just adopted it, so even if we went to the state, it would still have to, it'd still be a regulation.
Yeah, this all came about as something called the Deficit Reduction Act. You know, that was mandated by the feds.
I charge this committee that we need to try to figure out how that looks. That's such a
Get some strong,
counterproductive.
we need some strong lobbyists. It's been an issue since the beginning of welfare reform, to be perfectly candid.
All right, any other further questions in regards to that contract? Second reading suspension, is that what you need?
Don't need it. I mean, there's not ample time to have the third reading prior to July 1st. Ms. Conwell, you know that I'm pretty much on top of these.
So you do not need a second reading?
No.
Okay.
As long as you don't
Need to move
cancel it,
that.
as long as, you know, a council meeting is not canceled between now and July 1st.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to move this item to the full council for second reading. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chrissy, if you could read the last item into the record, please.
Resolution 2017-0094, authorizing amendments to agreements and contracts with various providers for the Cuyahoga County Fatherhood Initiative for the period 7/1/2014 through 6/30/2017 to extend the time period to 12/31/2017 and for additional funds as printed on the agenda.
Good afternoon, Councilwoman Conwell, and the rest of the committee. My name is Al Grimes. I'm Director of the Cuyahoga County Fatherhood Initiative, which is part of Job and Family Services. And these amendments that you have before you today will extend our fatherhood contracts till December 31st of 2017. It's a 6-month extension, at which time we will be issuing another RFP. Just as some overall background, the Cuyahoga County Fatherhood Initiative serves all fathers within Cuyahoga County that need assistance in being a better parent. And we promote the importance of fathers being involved in their children's lives, but also try to assist them with being there for their children, both emotionally and financially, because we know all the research shows that when both parents are involved, children live a more positive and productive life. We serve about 5,700 fathers and teens directly through our 12 programs. When we add on some of the special events like the Fatherhood Conference, the Fathers Walk to School, and our Toys for Tots, that adds another 12,500 folks. So overall, we serve about 18,000 parents a year through the Fatherhood Initiative. One of the ancillary benefits of the Fatherhood Initiative is that this year we received a $200,000 grant from the Ohio Department of Medicaid to assist in the fight against infant mortality by increasing the number of dads who go through our boot camp for dads in 7 or 10 targeted zip codes. We also got another $100,000 to work with 44 ministers around infant mortality as well. In addition, all of our programs are evaluated. Most of them are a combination of cost reimbursement and performance-based. So in order to realize the total value of the contract, they have to meet certain performance standards. And, the programs range from everything from boot camp for new dads to for new dads to those who are in K through 8 through our Healthy Fathers program, our Prevention of Premature Fatherhood group for teens, and also our programs for adult dads. So we try and make sure that fathers and fatherhood programs are there at every level of a child's life, because at the end of the day, our mission is to make sure that every child in Cuyahoga County has a productive and positive relationship with their fathers, and that both parents are involved, whether they live in the child's house or not.
Any questions from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Councilman Tuma.
Well, thank you for being here this afternoon. Just a quick question. We've done this before, being new here. How do you track, the fathers or the fathers that you're trying to make part of the program or to bring into the fold of the child's life? How do you? Because again, that's one of those situations where you're not exactly sure what is happening in the family situation,
Right.
and it's gonna take something coming from the individual himself to want to be a part of this program. So, do you have mothers contact you or other family members, or how's that work?
That's a great question, because it comes in a lot of different ways. We have a public awareness campaign where we're constantly getting the word out through our radio ads, our billboards, our kiosks, saying, if you need assistance in being a better parent, give us a call. And if you got some issues, we can probably address them. So sometimes we get calls directly from the dads. Sometimes we get calls from the mothers of the children, because those are their grandchildren, saying, hey, listen, I want my grandson to be more responsive. Sometimes we get calls from, a sister or an aunt saying, I have, a niece, I have a nephew that needs some assistance. So they come from a variety of different sources. Sometimes it comes from the mothers directly. Many times we have situations where the residential mom will just bring the child to the dad's house and say, listen, I can't handle this child. Now you take him and see if you can't raise him. And we have to be in a position where we can offer services for those dads that will help them address the needs of the children, now that they're now the residential parent.
What are the some of the practical things that you guys do to help a father who wants to become more involved in his child's life?
We have a number of different, and it depends on the program. For example, the boot camp for new dads, for new and expectant dads. What they're doing is they're coming to one of the 9 hospitals in county. They're learning how to change a baby's diaper. They're learning how to hold a child safely. They're learning about shaken baby syndrome. And very importantly, they're learning about safe sleep practices, so that even if the child is not, they're not the custodial parent, that when they're in their house or in their mother's house, that they're getting all of the same information that the custodial mom is doing. Our program, our 24/7 dad curriculum through our Strong Fathers program, has a curriculum that talks about anger management. It talks about healthy relationships. It talks about responsibilities that come with being a new dad. The Prevention of Premature Fatherhood program is going out and talking to teens about not becoming a dad until you're ready emotionally and financially. You know, what are some of the peer pressures from other students, whether it be boys or girls, to become a parent quickly and do those kind of things. The job training and preparation programs can pretty much speak for themselves. They go into one of our job preparation programs. They learn how, resume writing, interviewing skills. We do an assessment to find out what kind of barriers they have, and then we try and place them in a job. So I think it depends upon, what issues that the fathers are having to deal with when they call us. For example, we have a satellite office in the child support building from the Office of Custody and Visitation. And that's because if a child is born to unmarried parents in the state of Ohio, custody automatically goes to the mom. So in order for a dad to have the equal parenting rights, they have to take, even if they've established paternity, they have to take an additional step to get those rights. Well, what we wanted to do was make sure that at the time that they have their administrative hearing for paying their child support, they can file for those rights at the same time. Because, history shows us that when fathers have that visitation, they're more likely to pay child support. A couple of more new things we've done in the last couple of years is we've become a diversion program for fathers involved in the child support system or the juvenile court system. And what I say by that is we found out that taking driver's license sometimes because of child support really does not become as effective as it could be, because then you can't go and look for a job. So what we've done is if someone has their driver's license suspended, they decide that they will go through our 30-day job training program. We can help them find a job. We'll give them the license back as long as they commit to the program. The same thing with a program called Families on Track, where in the juvenile court system, a father's about to go to jail for non-payment. So we know if they go to jail, they're not going to be able to pay child support. So the same thing here. The judges and magistrates have decided, okay, as opposed to going to jail right away, if you go through one of the Fatherhood Initiative programs and try to find a job and keep in contact with the court, then we won't put you in jail. So, there's some of the offshoots of what happens from the work that we do.
Right, just a quick follow-up question. What is your, the average age of the father that you guys are dealing with?
I would say the average age is between 25 and 44.
Really, that wide of a range?
That's wide of a gap. It's surprising that you would think that, it'd be just younger dads, but in today's environment, you got a lot of, I want to say, it's like kind of middle-aged fathers.
Yeah.
So, if you look at those two and you say, okay, what's the average age between 24 and 45? Probably around 30, 31.
Right. Okay,
Yeah,
excellent.
it's not as young as you might.
Yeah, no, that's surprising to me. I would have thought you would have said, 18, 19. I'll be honest with you. You're really young.
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
Interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councilwoman Brown.
I doing, Mr. Grimes?
Hi.
Good. I was just curious, this may not even be a question for you, but you might be able to answer it. Do we know the total of the contract? It's usually listed in it, and I don't see it.
Yeah, this is for a 6-month period, so the total amount will be 400. The total amount that you see here will be 516,000. And what we've got one contract that's combined, which is the Metro Health contract. Part of that is from the grant. The $23,000 is extending the contract, but then $95,000 is this grant that I talked about that we got through the Ohio Department of Medicaid. So Health and Human Service portion of that's $416,000 because our annual budget is $832,000.
833.
832 for contracts. And that does not include the grant dollars.
Okay. And so none of these funds are related to the infant mortality program?
No, the infant mortality programs are over and above those funds. Those are the $200,000 grant I told you we got to increase boot camp for new dads in the targeted zip codes. And the $100,000 is the new project we have to work with 44 ministers. So no, it's not included.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
Any other? All right. No further questions. I have a lot, so I am going to forward them to you, Director Grimes. I started 2 last night, but I will forward them to you, and by the time the contract pass, I'm sure you'll have the answers to me. So I would like to make a motion to move this contract 0094 to the full council, second reading. Is there a second? Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clerk, last people that signed in?
Yes, we have 2 people signed in. First, Miss Rosie Palfy.
How many?
2.
2.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
council members. I wanted to bring up grievances with the shelter and just say that in general, I think that we get roughly at least $30 million going to shelter programs, transitional housing programs, and permanent supportive housing programs. And the only way to know if an organization is really doing their job is to have a transparent grievance process. And so I think that Councilwoman Conwell, she's a member of the Office of Homeless Services Advisory Board. And so I think that it would be a good suggestion to have every provider that gets money from the county or federal government to once a month or once a quarter provide a list of the number of grievances, whether they were regarding staff, security, other members, and then how they were resolved. Because the thing is, I saw something recently that said maybe there were 10 grievances, only 2 were substantiated, and maybe 8 were resolved. Well, how do you know whose favor they were resolved in? And just because a resident didn't appeal doesn't necessarily mean they're happy with the resolution. Excuse me. And I just think that we need to know about this instead of just being told, oh, we've got this grievance procedure in writing on paper and we're having resident council meetings. The other thing is, in 2010, we had a tragedy that council may or may not know about. A veteran with a mental illness at the transitional housing shelter run by Volunteers of America murdered the shelter director with a camping axe, and he was killed by the police when they came. Myself and other advocates asked the city and the county to investigate this, not to blame anybody, because the only person to blame was the man that committed this heinous act, but to look at how we can make shelters safe in the future. And that wasn't done. So I can tell you, I went ahead and put in a public records request. I got a copy of the homicide investigation. And I can tell you, any reasonable person that read this investigation would know that this act of violence was committed because of this man's unresolved grievances. And I've never seen somebody with grievances contact the office, like state public health, public taxation. I mean, he went through the internal grievance process. He was contacting county, state agencies, and his grievances didn't get resolved. And so my point is that I don't want to see something like this happen again. I don't want to see a tragedy. I don't want to see people trying to commit suicide at shelters. You know, we're not in their heads. We don't know why they could get pushed over the edge. But I think it's a legitimate concern. And I just think that that's something that we as a community need to address. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last is Ms. Liu.
Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Talking about grievances. Now, I have another grievance to file right here with you. I think you all have got copies of it. Please look at the photos. After last time I filed a grievance, this type of events has been on for years. For years. Now, look at the unauthorized response, which you have the photocopy too. Look at the response. Now, instead of letting us to get help, they actually posted a sign on the door, but this sign is unauthorized. It's not issued by the manager. I did file grievance against with the same nature before. Actually, manager already required all the staff, when you have a meeting, please leave the door open. So if residents need help, you will be able to know. Guess what? Not only now that they not just close the door, they actually post a sign. If you look at it carefully, you don't see manager's signature. You don't see that say Normal Her Women's Shelter Management, that kind of printing on it. Because we have this particular bad staff. She has been posting this type of sign, even on water jug. She refused to refill water jug to put clean drinking water for people. As I said that before, I have been here to learn and to let you know, people in the homeless shelters are not really asking for something as luxury. We don't even dare to expect we will have a full AC, full heat, computer labs, and this and that. We just want something basic, humane. I have said that before. When you come in this shelter, welcome to the inhumane society. Look at this. So the next 8 months, with the partnership going on, probably I have to file more grievances because the grievance system will be even more confusing and not working worse than now. But I do have to thank Mr. Brady, Mr. Miller, for your understanding. People at the shelters, we may see the change coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.